some people can hear me online. Oh, I see the little green box, so I think it's working for me. All right, somebody just reported that they can hear both, so something is working. I can hear you, Ken. So yeah, I've just tested it out. Seems like audio is being streamed through, so it seems like everything is live. All right, cool. Well, yeah, like Ken said, uh, I'm a developer, 3D modeler, and yeah, Seattle alumni now. So to go right into it, these are the topics that I'm going to be covering for today's presentation. So just a quick outline, um, and a quick kind of summary. We are going to be going over TwinMotion, and TwinMotion is an architectural visualization tool built on top of Unreal Engine. So those of you who are familiar with either Unity or Unreal Engine, it's kind of a similar kind of workflow. It's a game engine, basically, but it's compatible with Rhino and all of those other architecture tools. So the outline is going to be first, we're going to go quickly through activating the educational license and downloading Twinmotion, which I have all my links set up. And then I'm just going to share it in just 1 second after I go through the outline. And then we're going to go through optimizing performance. Not everybody has the strongest hardware available to them, so I'm going to go right away into how to optimize the engine to run on your device. And then I'm going to go through exporting your asset, your pavilion from Rhino, and then importing your asset into Twinmotion. I have an example set up for me, and I'm just going to quickly go over the file type um, uh, and export properties that you need to set up for Rhino. And then also how to import your asset into Twinmotion and placing your asset. So I'm just going to quickly load up in the background this guy. Um, and then we're going to go through placing your asset. So getting familiar with the manipulation tools and kind of placing your asset and scaling it and getting it into the environment. And then I'm going to go through scale and units. So obviously, it's at the end of the day, it's an architectural visualization tool. So it's important to get a really good sense of scale, a really good sense of dimensionality in the scene. So I'm going to add that as well. Um, and then navigating the Twinmotion interface. So um, there's quite a lot of tools offered and can be quite overwhelming. At the beginning. So I hope to kind of ease that transition a little bit. Um, and then the eighth topic is choosing your materials. We'll go through that. The ninth topic is pulling Holland Park, and I'll go over what that means. And then 10 is tips on creating an emotional impact to your presentation. 11 is additional polish. And then 12 is, and the final topic is pushing to the cloud and rendering. So here I have highlighted, for those of you who are kind of new to this technology, who are not really too tech savvy, I've also kind of boiled it down to here are the main topics that, out of all of the topics, these are the highest priority ones that you should take away from this presentation. So it's optimizing performance, exporting and importing, placing your asset, scale and units, choosing your materials, and then pushing to the cloud and rendering. If you're able to get all of those topics figured out, you'll be able to present your model. Cool. So stepping into Rhino really quickly. So the first topic, let me just get this guy out of the way. So the first topic that I'm going to be covering is I'm going to be covering optimizing performance in Twinmotion. So this is Twinmotion. This is a scene that I set up, and I hope that everybody can see this all right. But yeah, this is a scene that I set up as I was getting more familiar with the software, and it's Yeah, it's located in Holland Park. So if we kind of zoom out, you can see the school is right here. SFU Surrey is right here. That's the weird boat-shaped building. And then you've got kind of surrounding, um, uh, surrounding buildings that are all accurate and based off of, I think they pull Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps, some sort of open software. But anyways, this is the pavilion example that I set up. So the first topic is going into optimizing performance. So to optimize performance, you go into Edit, Preferences, or Control P, and then you go into this little Quality Settings tab here, and then you can mess around with your settings. So for those of you who are running this off of a laptop, or running this off of a low-end system, I'd recommend working with low settings. It's not going to look visually impressive, but that doesn't matter. At this point, it's about workflow and being quick with your iterations and really kind of just getting the main things of the environment in place. So in order to kind of determine whether or not you're running at a good frame rate, you can click this right here, this little arrow on the side. So that little arrow on the side gives you this view. So this is the scene hierarchy. And then you've got another little arrow here, which shows you the statistics of the scene. So this is going to show you things like frame rate and the different um, uh, how taxed is your system right now. So what's the GPU load, CPU load, things like that. Um, yeah, so that's performance. And there's like additional things that you could also go into detail if you're a little bit more tech savvy, like DirectX and VSync and things like that. But I'm not going to go over that because it's kind of outside of scope. So yeah, for performance right now, I'm going to go into high settings. I could go into ultra, but I am sharing and recording at the same time. And this is what the scene looks like. It's quite high fidelity, honestly. Um, a lot higher quality than I expected. And I'm just going to quickly show a video that's actually rendered within. How do I get this out of my way? Oh, I can grab it. Get out. I'm going to show a video that I created within this engine. Actually, I am going to showcase the final rendering that I did. So just give me 1 second while I pull up this file. Okay, it's here, here. All right, there we go. So we're gonna go through some stills really quickly that I took. So this is the first still that I took of the environment. It's the same environment, but basically what's happening here is that you're giving the engine enough time to actually go through and properly render out the scene. So you're not having any kind of interference, any artifacts. Like this is a proper ray traced rendering. And then I'm just going to quickly demonstrate the video as well that I've exported. So this was exported locally and created locally on my machine. And I'm just going to quickly give a commentary of the different kind of elements that I have here. So obviously I have vegetation, I have moving elements, I've got foliage. This is actually it's photogrammetry, which TwinMotion also has access to. And then I have this piano model as well. So this piano model is not included. I know some of you are going into creating and designing around the concept of um, a pavilion for musicians or something along the lines of that. So this model I outsourced from TurboSquid, and obviously the import process was quite straightforward. But there's other alternatives. So there's TurboSquid. You've also got Sketchfab. There's a bunch of 3D modeling sources that you can find online that has free assets, especially instruments. I'm sure you guys can find free instruments anywhere. So anyways, continuing on with the animation, there's real-time lighting. with shadows, and I'm going to go over that in a little bit of detail. I'm going to go over like the main topics, the main things that you guys should understand, and obviously variations in foliage. Um, and then another thing is the framing of the shots. I'm going to go over that as well. The scale, the people that are within the environment. Disregard the reflections. I was just experimenting with the weather system, so the reflections I felt like looked really nice. But yeah, that's the beauty of ray tracing, I guess. The only selling point of ray tracing. Um, but yeah, there we go. So that's the animation. It's a minute and 12 seconds long. I think this is longer than what you guys actually need to have. This is more of just kind of like a tech demo as well as, you know, kind of driving the point across as to what you can do in this software. So this is definitely longer than what you guys need, but it has those kind of important beats that shows off the pavilion, you know, shows off the architectural detail and things like that, the materials that you guys choose. Um, and yeah. So again, this is all rendered within TwinMotion, and I set it up all within TwinMotion. So hopefully by this point, some of you guys have had experience with some of the demo scenes. I know that me and Ken talked about that, but if not, you guys can always check out the demo scenes. I'm not going to open it up right now because this is a 16 gigabyte scene, so it's going to take me some time to open it up again. So I'm not going to open it. But these demo scenes, they give you a great rundown as to how the software works and yeah, everything about the software. So great demo scenes. Okay, so let's just jump into Rhino, and then at the end of the presentation, I'll go into a little bit more detail on my topic discussing tips and emotional impact. So in order to create a new scene, you can either do Control N or you can just go into File and create a new scene. So I'm just going to go here. No, I don't want to save. And you're going to get a blank scene. So this is what a blank scene looks like. Again, if you're not seeing this on the side, you just have to click these arrows. They're pretty hidden. So you just have to hit the arrow on the right side of the screen, and then you get your starting ground. So let's just jump into Rhino really quickly. One of the things that's going to be kind of challenging for some people is jumping between these two different softwares is that they've got a different kind of input schema. I'm familiar with TwinMotion at this point, but I think you can always change it to be either like the same as Rhino or 3ds Max or any of the other ones, but I'm so familiar with TwinMotion now, I'm not going to change it. So. Okay, so now we're in Rhino. I'm going to open up the pavilion that we just saw there, which is this guy. And something is feeling off about the range. Okay, now it feels right. So yeah, this is the pavilion that we just saw that I just kind of demonstrated that was included. And this is all built within Rhino. So in order to export it, into TwinMotion, what you want to do is you want to select the object that you want to export. So if you have multiple objects, you'd want to, drag and select. And then you just want to go into export, export selected, or sorry, no, export with origin, actually. You want to export with origin, and then you want to set up your origin point as to where you're going to be like scaling your asset from, rotating it, manipulating it, and so forth. So it doesn't really have to be perfect. But like in the center would be preferred. And then you've got this export window. So for TwinMotion, seeing as how it's a game engine, I've experimented with a ton of these file types, and I really was only able to get OBJ format to work. So OBJ is right here. It's a universally accepted format, typically used in game engines. So that's probably why this works really well. I think I saw some notes about SketchUp working, but I wasn't able to get it to work. So I used OBJ, and aside from like a couple of artifacts here and there, which you kind of get when you convert from NURBS into meshes, I didn't really see too much of an issue. Or FBX as well. I saw that somebody in chat said FBX. FBX is also a format, except it seems like Rhino is not a big fan of exporting very complicated, densely. When you convert from NURBS to mesh, you get dense geometry. It doesn't really like dense geometry, so I found OBJ works the most consistently. But yeah, FBX or OBJ works. So let's just export OBJ, and then you get this window here. You could go into OK. One thing that I do is I like to go down here and create n-gons and set the minimum phase to 2. I think this is using settings that I already set up previously. And then you just want to make sure that vertex welding is unmodified. If you start welding your vertices, you're going to get some weird... It's not that you're going to definitely get geometry with artifacts in it, but you will risk it. So don't risk it. Just go unmodified. Just have a nice looking model. That is what's important. And then everything else just keep as it is. So when you want to save surfaces, you do want to convert into polygon mesh. It will ensure the most compatibility with the engine. Well, it'll ensure compatibility, yeah. So we click OK, then you should see file successfully saved, yada, yada, yada. So now that we have the file, I'm just going to go into the directory as to where it is. And pavilion example, just give me 1 second. TwinMotion, pavilion example. Yeah. I'll check the recording after this. And if the recording is not good, then I'll just do another one. Okay, so yes, I can confirm that it has exported. So this is what you should get. These two right here. So MTL is kind of like a metadata. I think it contains some information about materials, and the OBJ contains a lot of information about the mesh itself. So all the vertices, triangles, etc. But anyways, so now hopefully that covers everything about exporting from Rhino. It's really not a complicated process. Just make sure that you have your assets selected. You don't want to be exporting, and also make sure that your layers are cleaned up so that you don't have, you know, I know that when you're building these pavilions out, you'll be having things like lines and stuff like that. So you don't want to be exporting unnecessary data. So make sure that your Rhino file is pretty cleaned up, and that it's only exporting what is necessary. So hopping back into TwinMotion, now that see I'm already like so used to Rhino. It's taking me a second for the muscle memory to kick in. Now that we're in TwinMotion, hopefully that covered it. How to export from Rhino. What you can do is you can hop over to this menu right here, this arrow going into the box, and this is kind of like your workspace. You can click import and start importing the pavilion. So when you're at this setting, you could collapse by material, but I know that you can set materials in Rhino. So I would, yeah, depending on how complicated your geometry is in Rhino, whether or not you have like a wide array of materials, I would keep the hierarchy. Otherwise, I would collapse by material. So I'm going to collapse by material for this guy because it's only one material that I have on it. But if you have multiple materials assigned, you could keep the hierarchy. Another thing that's important is this option right here. So fix UVs and texture. This is pretty important. I don't exactly know how Rhino generates UVs, For those of you that don't know what UVs are, I'm not going to get into that topic because it's quite complicated. Basically, just make sure that to have this enabled. Otherwise, your geometry is going to look really, really strange, or it's visually going to look displeasing. Okay, so that's it. Unit conversion, you can change this. I believe that right now TwinMotion is set into meters. You can change the unit conversion, so I'm just going to cancel this really quickly and show you how to change units. So again, edit preferences. There's a unit system here right now, and right now it's set to meters, so you can change it to inches if you'd prefer. I'm going to keep it in meters. I know that this asset is scaled horrendously, so I'm just gonna keep it to auto and then modify it in the scene itself. But as you can see, yeah, I just finished my import and I've got this massive object in the scene. So it's not oriented correctly because you can orient it correctly if you'd like, but if you get these kind of situations, it's just much faster if you just do it in the editor and just get it over with rather than going back and forth between engines. It's better just to get the demonstration up and running. So yeah, that's basically the import process. So again, I'm just going to go through that. You click the import button, you select what you want to import, you can collapse by material, fix your UVs. You can change this up axis, hypothetically, if you want to change this around and mess around with that. But I find that just dragging it in, knowing what my problem is, and then just modifying it works the best. So now I'm going to go through placing your asset. So to place your asset, sorry, if you find that you're trying to move your asset and it's not moving, it's likely that you've got the wrong thing selected. So just go over here to the right side of the screen, click the triangle, and then explicitly select the asset that you want to modify. So I want to modify my pavilion. There we go. And then I need to orient it correctly. So over here in this option, if your layout is the same, you've got this little arrow here. So this is the translate manipulator. You also have a bunch of other options here as well. So if you click this little arrow, it expands all of the different options. You've also got number keys that you can use as well, but I just prefer going to it manually. So if you click rotate, you get this little indicator on. And now if you want to rotate this object into place, you could manually rotate it. It's locked to increments of 5 degrees. But alternatively, if you just want to get straight to the point, don't click anything, just hover over it and then just say, and that's it. So again, you just hover over it, -90, click enter, and that's it. So yeah, this is how you get your object into play, into the scene, and start messing around with it. Now you could start manipulating the position like this, but typically if you're changing the position of your asset, you would want to switch to translate. This is the best tool for this. It's got 1 degree of axis, degree of freedom for rotation. And then all of the typical, like move it up, move it forward, I guess, move it horizontally. And then, this right here, when you have this option selected, it just says move along the plane. So this is just moving it along whatever plane it's detected. So yeah, that's the main manipulation tools. I'll have questions at the end in case there is something. So just if you guys have questions, just take a note down really quickly. And yeah, let me just get some water really quick. Cool. Okay, so now that we have our pavilion in the scene, we want to start getting a sense of scale. So I don't know if you guys have picked up on this yet, but obviously this is a brick and this is the pavilion. This is way too big, unless you want it to be this big, in which case kudos to you, but I don't want it to be this big. So let's get a sense of scale in units. So what you can do here is you can click this arrow and it gives you this library option. So this is all of the tools that come with TwinMotion, so you guys should have access to all of this. As a matter of fact, I forgot to go over downloading TwinMotion. I'll go over that at the end because it doesn't really matter, um, since most of you guys should have it installed already, but I'll go over it at the end. So if you go into posed humans or cutout, whatever you prefer, I like posed humans. You get access to a bunch of humans that you can mess around with. So let's just drag and drop this guy talking on his cell phone. And then I always like to bring a cat into the scene because cats are great. Awesome. So as we start, zooming out, this pavilion is way too big. So let's get to the point and scale it down. So in order to scale it down, again, click this arrow, open up your options, and select the scale tool. So if you hover over it for a second, it'll tell you what it is. So this is the scale tool. Again, you could do this manually by just dragging and dropping, but I like to do it based on figures. So I want to select this guy. As a matter of fact, if you ever get this situation where you're like, okay, well, I can't actually scale this object, it's because you've got the container selected. It's kind of a weird system. I don't actually like this about TwinMotion, but you have to go, likely when you're importing into TwinMotion, you'll have something similar to this, where it's like a folder. And if you expand the folder, you get all of these other kind of objects. So if you just shift right click them, um, right click them all, shift right click them all, you'll have the ability to scale these objects. So, 1 second. Excuse me. Okay, so now that we can scale them down, let's just enter a number, 125, click enter, and let's see how that feels. It doesn't feel the best, so I'm just going to scale it up by 10%. I'm just going to keep scaling it up by 10% until it feels right. So at this point, if you guys have any like illustrations or anything like that, you would want to keep them on the side and start taking a look at your asset. So one of the things that's distracting me right now is that there's shadows. I don't like that, so I'm just going to go to low settings, disable the shadows, and only get a sense of scale. So again, using the manipulator tool, or the translate tool, I'm going to start moving the object down because I noticed that it was actually floating in the sky a bit. And then what you could do here is click this little eye tab. There's somebody waiting. I'm admitted. Welcome. Oh, what a great sense of power. Um, yeah, I saw that my object was kind of floating in the air a bit, so I'm just gonna move it down a little bit, make sure that it's going through the ground. And then the next thing, yes, sorry. If you guys have any kind of specific perspectives that you have, what you can do is you can actually set the perspective here. So again, by clicking the eye tool, and if this little, tooltip bar is getting in the way and it's really annoying you, you can turn it off just by going down here and hiding the navigation. I like to do that immediately because I hate it. Again, so you click views, and then you can do front view like this and navigate the same way of WASD and take a look at the side view of your model, just to get a sense of scale. And it's the same thing. These are all orthographic projections. I don't actually know where the model is. So if you can't find it, if it's like somewhere off in the distance, you can always just click F and then it auto focuses on the target. And there we go. Oh, I didn't know the cat was animated. That's so adorable. Great. So to hop back in, just make sure you're back in your perspective. And yeah, there we go. You can set your own customs. There's a bunch of things that you can do here. This tool is fantastic. Wow, I can have goats in this? That's awesome. Okay, so that is placing your assets and getting a sense of unit and scaling. So I am manipulating all of this within a meters unit environment. So again, if you're working within inches, you can always change it by going to preferences, unit system, and selecting inches. I would work within meters because I like meters. Cool. Okay, so we've gone over scale in units. I've gone over navigating the interface. So now I'm going to start talking about something called pulling. Pulling the Holland Park. So I have an address over yonder. Let me just make sure that yes, seems like everything's fine. So I have this address here. So TwinMotion has this feature called pulling a map. And basically what that means is I think it goes into something called like Open Street View or something and it basically references and talks to a cloud network and just pulls a lot of information about the urban landscape and creates a 3D representation of that urban landscape. So if you ever used like Google Maps or Apple Maps on your phone and you see the 3D visualization of your environment, it's basically just that, but at a lower fidelity level. It doesn't pull all the textures, so you're not going to see buildings with textures and stuff. They're just going to be gray boxes, but it gives a great sense of like actually a context. It gives a great sense of context for your environment, and that's why I like to use it. So in order to get to it, what you want to do is you want to go over here to this context menu. So it's this little building and tree menu. You want to click it, and then you want to go to urban. So when you go into urban, it's going to auto position you in France. I don't know why. Maybe because the developers are in France, but don't be scared of that because you can go to Canada. It's fine. So I have the address here. So I'm just going to click enter and hopefully it's going to find it. Otherwise, we're going to have to manually go find Holland Park. So it seems like it's running into some issues right now, maybe. You can always like scroll in and out just to see if the system needs a bit of a wake up. Oh, something happened. What happened? Nope, still in France. I think I'm in France. I don't actually know. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I entered the address and you can see that there's this option that popped up. You actually have to click the option. It's bad UX. I thought you just click enter. But if we click the option, now we've got Holland Park and it's fantastic. So as you can see, this is Simon Fraser University, so we're at the right place. Awesome. So in order to actually pull the park, what you want to do, you can see that I'm trying to click grab, but nothing's happening. It's because you actually have to define a section of the map that you want to pull. It's not going to pull all of it because then your computer is going to blow up. So what you want to do is you want to select zone to grab. So there's this little button right here. When you click that, you get this little cropped view of the map that you want to actually pull. So you want to just manipulate the map and just move it into a position that you actually want. So you can still zoom in and zoom out. It's all the same functionality. I've tried changing like the dimensions of this, but I haven't been able to figure it out. Maybe one of you guys can figure it out. And what I mean by is like move these control points and just actually manipulate them, but I can't do that. So I'm just manually placing them, and it seems to work fine. So yeah, this seems like, let's go here because I want to get some buildings around. And maybe a little bit more of the SFU Surrey campus. So I'm comfortable with that position. Let's just center the park a little bit more. I'm comfortable with this position. So now I'm just going to click grab, and now the system is going to go and download and do its magic in the background. In the meantime, I'm going to drink some water. Yeah, I don't know how big you can go with this. I would keep it pretty small scale. You don't have to think about like manipulating the scale or whatever. Oh, I hope I'm in meters. I don't remember. You don't have to worry about setting scale or anything like that. It should automatically do that. So as you can see here, if you want to go into full screen view, by the way, just click this button. Now you're in full screen view. Just make sure you're not rendering like ultra settings, because then your computer is gonna blow up. So yeah, this is Holland Park, and it's surrounding urban geometry and also a lone tree. This always happens. I don't know why. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So again, again, to pull the park, you go down here into context, urban. It's going to put you in France. I don't want to be in France. I want to be in Surrey. And then you click this button, set your zone. I'm not going to do it again because I've already pulled the map and I'm comfortable with this location. But you click this zone to grab, you select the zone, and then you click the grab button. And then it should auto fill everything else. So what we've actually added is a new, context menu. So there's a bunch of things here. There's like buildings, there's parks, there is roads, everything. It's actually kind of insane. This is really, really cool tech. Um, but for the most part, don't touch this. Leave it as it is. Just focus on making sure that you're, positioning your pavilion correctly. So I'm just going to quickly go over. I want to take both of these guys and go move them. If you want to change your speed, by the way, I'm just going to show this really quickly. If you find that you're kind of struggling to move through the space and it's quite slow, 1 to 4 is actually, you can either move forward and hold shift and you go a little bit faster, but you can also just change the speed by, selecting 4, or manually I think you can go here and then set your speed. So now I'm going to be flying like a plane, and this feels nothing like flying in a plane, so they lied. Yeah, so that's how you change your speed. You can just change your speed really quickly like that. So click F, focus on my object. And now I want to move both of these guys, and I want to, whoa, see, too fast. I want to move them right here because this looks like something I would put a pavilion on. So I want to move both of those guys over there, but as you can see, every time I move them out there, I actually am not moving the scale people. So if I want to move the scale people at the same time, what I can do is right click, create a new container. So I'm just going to call it my container. And then I'm going to put both of these guys. So shift, hold, drag, drop. So again, shift, hold, drag, drop. And then now if I select my container, I can move both of these guys together and move them into position. The origin of this is kind of wonky. You can move it by just going like this. So clicking this button, the pivot edit button, allows you to modify the pivot point. So this is just it's just a quality of life thing. It's much better to do it like this. And then I'm comfortable with that. So now my pivot point is nice and accurate. So I feel comfortable with this location, but obviously I'm not too comfortable with the cat phasing into the ground, so I'm going to move everything up slightly until the guy's feet start getting cut off. Not the tail, no. Okay, let's go maybe like 0.01. Think about meters, right? So I don't want to move too far up and I want to do it in small increments. And then if you're struggling to figure out, like, okay, are these guys floating or not? You could always just come back here and just enable shadows. So right now shadows are enabled, so I'm just going to enable shadows. And that didn't help out too much, but if we go and turn off pavilion, also clicking the I button disables and enables things. It looks like these guys are indeed grounded, so that looks good to me. We just open up, check the time, we're good. Okay, cool. So now that we have our pavilion in the scene and we've got our sense of scale, I don't like it. Actually, I'm going to scale it down 0.95. Okay, that's actually feels a lot better. Yeah, so now that we have a sense of scale and a cat in the scene, we're going to go into materials. So in order to assign materials, you just go over here to the left side of the screen, click this button that says materials. If you're in a different setting, maybe you're like somewhere here for some reason, just click in the back button until you get to materials. Now that you're in materials, you've got a bunch of imported materials that you can choose from. So I'm going to choose wood because I think that's the materials that you guys have been assigned. So I'm going to go with wood slicing. And obviously, right off the bat, this doesn't look good. And why does it not look good? Well, it's because the scaling is all off, or maybe the design is not looking that good, and the quality is kind of low as well. But you get this option here where you can actually start modifying the scale. So I'm going to bring the scale up, or sorry, down, 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 down. I'm going to bring the scale down until I feel like it's at a comfortable level. Yeah, sure, 0.15. I'm going to do something slightly different than what I did with my demonstration. And, you know, think about things like things that don't make sense. So like that doesn't make any sense. Having these kind of vertical lines in this material makes no sense. So yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to choose something else. Something that doesn't show that as much. So I'm just going to choose this. And again, let's go to 0.1. And yeah, that feels a little bit better. Although it's the same as what I had, but it just seems to be the thing that works for this model. And I'm not seeing that distraction, those distracting lines. So yeah, I'm going to stick with this material. So it's as simple as that, really. You just drag and drop and then modify your scale. And then you can also modify additional properties, like I don't like the color. I want to make it maybe a little bit more like bamboo-ish, I guess. So I'm just going to go over here, click this button, modify the color. That's about that. You can also change things like reflection as well. Let's say that it just got rained on. So I'm going to change the reflection to be something quite high, something like that. Or maybe it's really dry outside or something, so I'm going to keep it very low. You can, yeah, mess around with it here. I typically like to go somewhere a little bit higher than 50%. Sure. And then there's additional details as well. So if you don't want bump maps, you can always disable bump maps, but I would keep them because it looks good. But yeah, that's about it. I wouldn't go too far into these advanced settings because they can start getting pretty complicated pretty quickly. So I just modify, you know, the basic ones like scale. So it changes the tiling, reflection, which just changes the reflection, and then the color. Those are the main ones. Don't worry about weather. It's some crazy technology that they have. So yeah, that's choosing your materials for the scene. So the next thing I'm gonna do is, well, I'm gonna increase the resolution because I am starting to get a little bit more comfortable here. So the next thing that we're gonna be talking about is just tips on emotional impact. So obviously this is a pretty comprehensive tool. You've got a lot of things like trees that you can start placing in your scene very, very quickly. So I'm going to go over really quickly. Okay, get out of here. I'm going to go really quickly over how to do that in just 1 second. The first thing I'm going to do is the problem with the map pulling system is that it's not UV unwrapped. So if we start applying materials onto the surface, you can see that, you know, there is no detail in this texture, and that's because this has not been unwrapped. There is no data. There is no UV data with this, so unfortunately, can't really work that way. So what you can do is you can just kind of approximate it or fake it. So what I find works for me is going into objects, primitives, and then setting a base circle. So scale this guy up a little bit. For this one, you can be a little bit more, a little bit more liberating with you know, changing the scale. Just do whatever feels right. Just make sure that it's not like off-centered or whatever. So I'm gonna go into top view really quick. I'm gonna focus, and then Q and E to go up and down. I'm just gonna move it right into the center. And that feels right for me. So the benefit of this versus, you know, just applying a material onto the surface is that I get additional detail and it's unwrapped. So I can go down into my stones and I can just place a stone down and oh wow, it looks incredible. I actually like this color palette. It's nice. But yeah, that's the main benefit is that you're able to apply materials. They're automatically unwrapped, so you don't have to worry about those kind of things. And if you find that this kind of stuff is distracting you, like this ground plane, and you don't want to include it in your presentation, you can always just remove it. So you can just disable it here. So by selecting it, just make sure that this orange outline is um, is what you want to select, and just hide it. Um, so now I'm going to go over really quickly applying that, building emotional impact into your scene. So a really quick tip is setting active containers. So as you can see, I'm just going to increase, go here, move, nope, stop, move here. As you can see, I created a new container. So for those of you who are familiar with Unity, this is like empty game objects. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. It's just used to organize your scene and, create hierarchies. It's pretty basic. But where it's can be quite annoying is if you start getting like really into your scene. So let's set this guy to active, and I'll go into detail as to what that means in just one second. If you go into your scene, you're like, okay, I'm going to focus in and I'm going to start, placing a bunch of vegetation down and get really comfortable with the scene, start really thinking about it. As you can see, these objects were placed under a under this container that I just did not want to mess around with, which is the Google Street View that I just pulled. So I actually am going to delete those guys, or if you don't want to delete them, have them selected and then move them to the container. But remember to set the container to active so that any new objects that you place will be placed under this container, because otherwise you are going to be going crazy. It's really annoying having to go through and then manually put things into the appropriate containers. So to change the name, just click the three-dotted menu and just go My Trees. And then this is the beauty of it, is that it's a container, so anything that you disable and enable will react to the container, to the hierarchy. So in order to determine what is the active container, you just look at what is bolded. It's kind of hard to see, it's bad UX. I think it should be a different color, but whatever. As you can see, this is now the main container because it's bolded. So I'm going to set this to be the active container. So I'm going to create a new one and call it My Terrain. I'm going to set it to active. And now I did control save because it's built into my brain. So lecture example 02. So I'm going to save. Oh, that happened very quickly. Awesome. Remember to save your work as frequently as possible, please. If you want, you could also have autosaves. If you go down into preferences, save, you can autosave every 15 minutes. I'm going to choose a path. Choose right here. Yes? Yes. Okay, great. So you can save every 15 minutes. Do that. Trust me, it's going to save you a lot of pain, and it'll be great. So it's almost 6 o'clock. So I think I have enough time to go over this. So the next thing I'm going to be covering is setting a terrain. So again, because this is a pulled landscape, you cannot just go in and start applying materials onto this. It's not going to do anything. It's going to stay, maybe the green is going to change slightly, but it's really not going to do much. So what I found works the best is if I go into vegetation and then landscapes, and then drag and drop flat into the scene. Or you can do rocky grasslands, but it's not a rocky environment. It makes no sense. So just place flat into the scene. So what this has generated is something called a terrain. So as you can see, we can't really see it right now, and that's because it's actually slightly, let's go to one, slightly underneath the plane. So there you go. This material textured surface is what you're looking for. So in order to get it to actually render on screen, you're just going to want to start bringing it up. I wouldn't recommend moving it manually like this because it's a lot of points that you're changing. So make sure you have it selected and then just start slowly moving it up. So I'll move it up in 0.1 increments. And then again, just slowly move it up. Okay, so that's too much. So now I'm going to slowly move it down by even a smaller amount. So I'm going to go 0.05. Okay, and that feels right. I'm pretty sure this is fine. Just make sure you don't have something that we call in the industry Z fighting. So it's basically if you see a lot of flickering that's happening in your environment, it's because you have two surfaces that are like perfectly overlapped, or at least the GPU thinks it's perfectly overlapped, so it starts freaking out, and that's why it's causing that flickering. So you don't want that. So just mess around with the positions until it feels about right. So now that we have the terrain, we have these two little features right here. We can either sculpt it, um, which is just placing and distorting the terrain and just moving it up or down. Um, or you could also go down to landscape and you can start painting it. So with paint, you have the ability to just add a little bit of variety. So let's change the diameter, and that doesn't make much sense. Think about like what actually makes sense. So one of the things that I think about is that there is paths that people follow. And when they follow those paths, they disrupt the ground. So I'm going to create some baths coming out of this pavilion. Wow, incredible. That actually looks so nice. Um, Great. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but yeah, something along the lines of this. Okay, and then for additional variety, I'm just gonna maybe add very subtle, tone down the opacity, just very subtle variations. And sure, that feels fantastic. Okay, so now that we have terrain in the scene, one of the things that this gives us access to is, um, well, it gives us access to a textured surface, which feels really good, but it also gives us a nice kind of surface just to play around with. So now I'm going to be covering, and this is more of an advanced topic. So I think I'm going to give this around 5 minutes, see how much detail that I can get out of there, and then I'm going to go over pushing to the cloud and rendering, just because that is a pretty big topic. Um, so if we go back to the context menu, we also have this vegetation paint. You don't want to use vegetation scatter because this terrain is so big. This is a massive terrain. What vegetation scatter does is it distributes assets across this plane evenly, and you just don't need that amount of information because think about the framing of the shot. You're only going to be really looking at um, your pavilion, and that's pretty much it. So you don't need to know what's on the other side of this map. So I would recommend using something called vegetation painting. So as it implies right here, drop a model here to paint it on the surface. So I'm going to start with grass because that's typically what I like to do. And I know that Holland Park has some pretty dead grass. So I'm going to apply some long dead grass. And now you can just kind of start painting away. I don't like the density of that, and I just made a mistake. So that is, if you could do Control Z, it automatically removes that layer. It's another feature that I'm not a big fan of. Because I'm really just kind of testing things out here. But if you want to change the density of it, you just click on it, you get this density option, and I want to tone it down quite a bit. So if you can't paint on the surface and you're kind of wondering why, it's because you don't have the brush tool selected. So you have to make sure that the brush tool is selected. So now I'm just going to start kind of painting away, just adding some vegetation. It feels really good. You don't think it's going to add too much, but there is like subtle movement in the grass, and when you're rendering things out, it's just that small little amount of detail that it just feels really, really good. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna quickly do this, and let's say I cross over a path, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't make much sense. I want to remove that. So you can click this erase tool here, and I can just start erasing things from that. And then, yeah, and this is really about the point where I start thinking about framing, and thinking about the framing of my shot, and like where are these kind of nice viewpoints that I have in my pavilion, and start really focusing on the detail around that. So the other thing that you get access to, so just click somewhere else, make sure that you're not in the same tool, just click somewhere else to get out of that tool so you can create another, treat this like layers. So this is now a new layer because the grass is not here. So now I'm going to start distributing some study the terrain in Holland Park. Look at the trees and study the trees and study the relationships between the trees, the bushes, the plants, and so forth. That'll kind of further make this a realistic environment. So as you can see, nothing is kind of, well, until that, nothing was being planted. It's because they're using the system that actually thinks about the context and how much room these trees need to actually grow. So as long as you just kind of keep clicking around, you'll eventually place a tree down. So that's kind of why I don't like to use this system, and manually placing trees kind of makes more sense to me. Um, but yeah, that's pretty good. So one of the benefits of this tool though is that you can quickly swap in and out different assets. It's quite interesting that way. So I like this blue spruce tree, and I'll just drag it in, and then now I've got some additional trees in there. So let's say I want some bushes as well. So you place bushes down, and you can see that it manually or automatically placed bushes down as well into the scene, which is starting to feel really, really good actually. So I'm really liking this. Great. So yeah, that's kind of my typical process is I build the terrain, put the grass down, and then start putting the foliage down. And then in between, I start thinking about things like rocks. Um, like that's maybe too aggressive. I want to maybe do something a little bit more subtle. So something like that, and then rotate it just slightly. Okay, that's great. And then just move on. Don't spend too much time. Just get the main things in the scene, and that's pretty much it. This is not a very kind of rocky environment, so it doesn't really make much sense for this to be in abundance everywhere, but have it in some places here and there, just to further kind of make the scene a little bit more real. But anyways, that is besides the point. So now the important topic is really rendering and demonstrating your model and your scene. So the last thing I'm going to cover is additional polish, but find your shots, and what you can do is you can actually select this option right here, which is the media tool. So the media tool has all of these um, uh, options available to you: the image, video, presentation, and panorama. So I haven't actually used panorama yet. I've only used image and video and presentation. I don't really get the use of panorama right now for your purposes, but you can explore it if you want. So select image and yeah, just position the camera in the scene. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I like this tree, so I'm going to frame it with this tree, and I'm going to take a photo. So this takes a screenshot of what was your viewpoint, and then you can just feel free to move around. And I'm going to get nice, personal and close to the pavilion, and I'm going to highlight maybe some of the arches or something. Show off qualities of your pavilion, show off qualities of your design. So I really like this kind of, I guess this is a parametric design, these like stripes and stuff. I think it looks quite nice. And then I'm going to take one far shot, maybe like in the trees from a perspective of a squirrel. I don't know why, but sure. There we go. And now what you have access to is actually, you've saved these shots, so now you can go back and forth. And what I would recommend here is that you start crafting and polishing based around these shots that you've determined. This is how you ensure the highest quality possible. And I just feel like this is generally a good approach. So these are the shots that you've made. So you can cycle through them, and then you can still move around and everything at. But one of the things that you lose access to is the settings tab. So you just need to make sure that you quit media mode. So if you enter media mode, you can see these black bars. It's more cinematic. Just make sure to quit the media mode. So now we're going to go into taking videos. So it's pretty much the same kind of workflow. So let's create a video. And sure, I like this shot. So as you can see, I clicked the plus button and it crafted this like initial frame. So now what I want to do is I want to do a nice little orbit of the pavilion. So what I want to do is I want to shift and then a middle mouse button. And I want to find a pivot point, which is somewhere right in the center of the pavilion, right around here. And then I want to click and drag. And then I want to click plus. So now what this has made is it's made a transition, an interpolation between these two frames. That looks like this, right? So it's already starting to feel quite cinematic, and that was like an hour of work. Um, that being said, I am quite fast, so hopefully I'm not rushing this. Hopefully this is feeling all right. But now let's say we want to create another shot and maybe do something a little bit more close, just because that's what I was thinking about when I was taking those photos. So I'm gonna just start here and then maybe pan down or something. Think about your shot. What do I want to show? Options. Okay, there we go. So in order to reset, just remember to refresh it. So this refreshes it to what the current camera is looking at. And now I want to start panning down and maybe moving down or something like that. Just in line with this vertical axis, because sure. And now if you click play, just always click play, feel what the timing, what does the timing feel like? What does it, invoke so far? What feels like it's too forced? Things like that. And, that's feeling pretty good because there is a pretty dynamic change in terms of um, uh, the direction that the camera is moving. It's angled, so that's feeling pretty good to me. Um, and I like the cut as well. So the next shot, let's say this cat. Let's focus on the cat. Always focus on the cat. Let's click play or click add to add a new sequence. And then depending on the sequence that you have selected, you can expand or collapse. Expand or collapse. So I want to expand this sequence, but there's only one part. So now I want to, expand it. And I want to go far away. So I'm going to guess that this transition is not going to feel right. Yeah, that doesn't feel right. So obviously, put more thought into this. This is quite rushed. But, this transition, think about the transition and whether or not it actually feels okay. This transition feels kind of bad. Like I don't like it. So it could be a matter of two things. So you can change the timing by selecting the part length here. And I'm just going to change it to 15 to make it a little bit slower. Perfect. And the other thing that you can do to just kind of make more seamless transitions is clicking the scissor button right here and just clicking fade to black or fade to white. I don't recommend fade to white. It will make you blind. So fade to black. Save. Auto save. It's perfect. So yeah, fade to black does what you think it might do. It fades it to black. You don't really have too much control as to where it fades to black. Just trust the system. I've gotten nothing but good results out of it. So yeah, and that's the video demonstration technology that TwinMotion has, and it feels pretty good. So yeah, just go through it several times. If your frame rate is not good, remember that you have edit, preferences, quality, low. This is, you're framing your shot. Don't think about performance right now. Frame your shot, get it correct, get it feeling right. And yeah, don't make it too long, of course. Think about the timing, 10, 10, 15, 35. Is that what you guys need? It's not what you guys need. It's based on the criteria of the assignment, so I don't exactly know what the criteria is, but I think it's somewhere between 15 to 30 seconds. So let's just let's take away just some seconds here. Make it a little bit faster. So now I'm at 28 seconds, and I like this first shot the most, so I'm going to keep it where it was. That feels awesome. Great. It doesn't look stunning, but don't worry about that. That's fine. Um, so now I'm going to go over pushing it to the cloud. So what we want to do now, so now we've got our shots, our nicely framed shots. We've got our video, our nicely framed video, and animated video. What we want to do now is create a presentation. So again, go down into this button right here, media mode, presentation, create a presentation, and then click here to add media. So you want to start adding some media. So I want to add some of the shots that I added. So I don't like this interior shot as much. So I'm just going to exclude it by, clicking Control and excluding it. And then I'm going to drag and drop it in there. And then these are my shots, and this feels great. So I also want to include the video in my demonstration, so I'm just going to include it halfway through. And then if we click play, it's more of just like a still. There's some animations going on with the grass, which feels quite nice. And it's pretty easy to just kind of move it around, or at least should be. Oh, I guess not. I guess you're gonna have to remove it manually. Yeah, did not know that. I thought you can just kind of drag and drop it, but I think you have to manually remove it and drag it back in by doing add media presentation. Cool. Okay, so now that we have our presentation, I'm just going to save really quickly, and now we're going to go into export settings. So you have two options here. You have local exporting and then cloud exporting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do cloud exporting. So you can push to the cloud, but this is only going to export essentially the engine, but on the cloud. So you're going to be able to navigate through it and everything like that, but you're not going to have a presentation. So we do want a presentation. So what we want to do is we want to click presentation. We want to select the presentation that we just created. Click it, make sure that you have the presentation selected, make sure that it's not empty, and now you want to push to the cloud. So now this is going to talk to their servers and everything like that. I'm just going to open up TwinMotion right away as this is transferring. And I'm just going to show you guys the video that I created. So it was the video that I showed at the beginning of the class. Excuse me. It's the video that I showed at the beginning of the class. And it's rendered on their cloud systems, so it's very high quality rendering. So I'm just going to show that really quickly and show what that means. And then I'm going to go through just a couple of things really quickly for the URLs and the passwords and stuff and what that means. So as this is loading in the background, actually, I'll just go over that. So this is the TwinMotion Cloud interface. So how I got to that is I went into push to cloud, this button right here, and I just opened the TwinMotion Cloud. So this interface has a bunch of neat little tools. So one of the things that it has access to is this URL. So you could share this with other people, or you can embed it in your portfolio, for example. If you're doing portfolio pieces, I would probably render it out locally, preferably images. You can render out videos and presentations as well, just like how you render things out on the cloud. But it requires more powerful tech, hardware, I mean. So if you don't want to enable password, you can always just disable the password and just share the URL with people, and you should have access to it right away. So I already have it open here, so I'm just going to go to it. So this is the interface, and like I said earlier, this is very similar to the engine. Obviously, there is some latency. There's quite a lot of detail, so expect that. But this is the video that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. So if you want to show the presentation, I'm just going to click play, and it starts you from the presentation. And we've already seen this, so I think that pretty much wraps it up for me. There's some additional polish topics that I have, but I know that you guys are probably ending class around 6:20. So I am just going to open it up to some questions right now and then go through some polish if you guys want. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I got chat open right here to the side. Yeah, no worries. So for glass, what we would do is we would go back here, choose materials, and glass is the first material that you have available to you. So if you've exported your object into multiple separated materials, you should be able to just assign them individually. This is exported all as one. So assigning one material to this assigns it for everything. So I would have to manually separate them in either Rhino and then export them separated in order to assign them individually. But yeah, to choose glass, you just go down here and just select the glass that you want. Hopefully, yeah, it's a bit more of an involved process for sure. For this asset, it's probably not the best because yeah, because this guy has already been kind of committed down and merged down. But if you have a pavilion and you've got a lot of different materials, you'd want to select those materials and import them separately and then assign those materials individually. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so this is a transparent material right now. I don't want that, so I'm just gonna go back to something like this. Great. So in order to add lights to the scene, what you want to do is you want to again come back to this menu right here, click lights, and you've got a plethora of different options to select from. So let's add light sources into the scene. Unfortunately, I do think that it's probably not going to show up. I don't actually know. Oh, it does show up. Never mind. Just because I'm in low settings, obviously the lighting quality has been decreased quite um, quite noticeably. So one of the with my typical format with lighting, I like to do either point lights. So I like to start off with point lights and kind of give myself, or omnidirectional lights, and give myself a nice sense of ambience. And then you've got yourself a bunch of different options here. You can change the mood if you want. You can be really extreme and pretend that your pavilion is in hell, but I'm not going to do that. Oh no, you can have pot lights if you want. So um oh yeah, fair enough. So with the pot lights really quickly, I'm just gonna use one of these spotlights, something that feels kind of right. Sure, something. Oh, actually, never mind. Sorry, this is the place where I'm like really picky about what I want to do. Um, Yeah, sure that. So you place your light into the scene, but then obviously, this doesn't look right. I want a pot light. I don't want a spotlight coming from the top. So what you want to do is you want to select it. You want to click the rotate tool, and then you just want to rotate 180 degrees along either the, um, uh, I guess, x-axis or uh, the z-axis. And then you have your pot light. And you just position it to whatever you feel is right. Yeah, yeah. For performance options, make sure you don't have shadows enabled. Shadows and having a lot of these lights in your scene is going to destroy your performance. Even on my computer, it destroys performance. And also make sure that you don't have haze on because nobody's smoking in this pavilion. It makes no sense. So disable it. And then I guess I'll cover this really quickly. So with these light sources, so I like that. This is looking good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Control C, Control V. And this is going to create this copy window. So what I want to do is I don't want to create a copy. I want to actually create an instance. So an instance is like, for those of you who are familiar with Figma, it's like creating a component. Um, so that if I make any adjustments to this master, so make sure that you name it something, I like to go, um, uh, I like to go here and call it root. So this is the root object, and any lights that have been instanced from this are going to inherit its properties from this. So any color changes, intensity changes, anything like that. And you just want to do that a couple of times. So what I like to do is I just like to quickly do it and then position them post like this. So now I have a bunch of instances. So the only thing it doesn't inherit is position, of course. So I'm just going to position them all at the right corners. And you don't have to be too accurate with this. You can see that I'm pretty fluid with this. I'm not like too meticulous about this kind of stuff. You just want to have it so that any kind of variations that you see don't stand out like a sore thumb. And that feels about right. So without lights, doesn't look as dynamic. With lights, honestly, it's starting to look a little intense. So I am going to decrease the intensity of this ambient light source just slightly. And then again, like the beauty of this, oh yeah, it inherited all the names. Don't confuse yourself. Okay, so now we're good. And again, one of the nice things about this is that it inherits all of the changes. So I'm gonna go to 4. I'm gonna maybe make it a little bit more warm lighting, and I'm just gonna just decrease the intensity down to 200. And there you go. That's how you add lights into your scene. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, hopefully the recording was fine. Uh, I will take a look at that. From my understanding, it is currently recording. Um, so I just wanted to quickly go over. There is an education license, so TwinMotion /en-us/license. There is an education license that I highly recommend you guys pick up. One of the benefits is that you've got full resolution exporting, um, which is quite nice if you want to do some portfolio quality renderings. I used an account that has no connection to SFU, and I was able to get an education license. I still don't understand why I was given access to this. So it seems like it's open for some sort of exploitation. So yeah, just make sure don't make money off of it. Yeah, no, it's totally fine. 2K is totally fine. It's high quality, but if you're doing something that's more kind of game industry oriented, you'd probably want to render something quite high quality. Yep, no worries. Cool. Yeah, this was a neat little one that I wanted to showcase really quickly. For people who are like really interested in that, like architectural, um, like modeling uh, presentation, I know that Russell likes that quite a bit. This is kind of emulating that to a degree. So yeah, like blue foam exactly. So this is really high quality stuff. Like this feels really, really cool. Um, and you can just explore it and figure out what you want to use. So I typically like to keep vegetation off, build some contrast, and then you've got a nice little play. There we go. No worries. Awesome. If there's no other questions, then I'm gonna hop off. Yeah, no worries. Okay. Yeah, no worries, guys. Have a good one. I have no idea how to leave. Okay, wait, no, I think I got it. Okay, bye guys. Have a good one.